Welcome to Nero Wolfe's world, where orchids bloom and secrets unfold. Tell us where you're tuning in from. Archie will keep score, Wolfe won't admit he cares. Subscribe for more classic Nero Wolfe mysteries. Every good mystery deserves good company, and a little gratitude between cases. A warm thank you to Norma, our newest patron. Your support keeps the orchids blooming and the mysteries alive. Join the circle of mystery lovers on Patreon. Link in description. Nero Wolfe and the client he called a friend. It started with a knock that didn't belong on Nero Wolfe's door, hesitant, apologetic, and entirely wrong for the hour. At 11:45 on a wet Manhattan night, any knock that soft usually came from a conscience. I was in the office with a ginger ale, rereading a file on a missing heiress who wasn't missing anymore. Her husband had found her at the Stork Club, dancing with a trumpet player, when the sound came again. 2 knocks, then a pause. Not police, not delivery. Human. I set my glass down, crossed the rug, and opened the door. There he was, Captain Charles Renshaw. I'd last seen him in uniform, all brass and backbone, heading off to some intelligence post that required him to say nothing and look important doing it. The man in front of me was smaller, same frame, less confidence, as if someone had drained a gallon of certainty out of him and replaced it with rainwater. His hat sagged, his coat dripped, and his face carried the kind of lines a man earns only by reading his own obituary in the papers. "Archie," he said, voice roughened by too many unsent messages, "I need to see Wolfe." "You and half of New York," I said, "but they usually come during office hours." He managed a ghost of a smile. "I wouldn't if I had a choice. That kind of line will get you past me 9 times out of 10, and this was one of the 9. I ushered him in, took his coat, and told him to wait by the hat rack while I warned the master that humanity was at the gate. Wolfe was at his desk, eyes closed, hands steepled, pretending the world didn't exist. Fritz had long since retreated upstairs, and the only sound was the faint tick of rain on the window panes and the slow burn of Wolfe's cigar. "A man wishes to see you," I said. "Charles Renshaw. Navy intelligence, retired. Looks like the Navy forgot to tell his face it's peacetime." Wolfe opened one eye. "At this hour?" "At this hour." He sighed, which in Wolfian translates to, "Life is intolerable, but I shall endure it." He touched the bell cord. "Fritz." It took precisely 30 seconds for Fritz to appear at the doorway. Hair neat, expression patient, immaculate as ever, even at that hour that probably cost more than my last suit. "Yes, sir." "Coffee," Wolfe said, "for 3 and biscuits. Our visitor may need fortification." Renshaw entered while Fritz was gone, hat in hand, eyes darting like a man checking exits. Wolfe didn't rise, of course. He rarely does for anyone who doesn't sign his checks. But his gaze sharpened, taking in the damp coat, the nervous hands, and the faint scent of iodine that drifted across the room. "Captain Renshaw," Wolfe said, "you have served your country, and now you appear ready to betray its bedtime. What compels this intrusion?" Renshaw stood a moment longer before answering. "A mistake, Mr. Wolfe, one that might cost me my name and my life." Wolfe grunted. "A compelling combination. Please sit." He did, heavily, as if the chair might save him from gravity. Fritz returned with the tray, 3 cups, silver service gleaming, the steam from the coffee cutting through the rain-damp air. I poured for Renshaw, then myself, leaving Wolfe to his private ritual. "I've been accused," Renshaw began, fingers tightening on the cup, "of selling defense plans, sonar schematics for the Navy's new anti-submarine grid. Someone's using my credentials to move files, and I can't prove I didn't." "Then you are a fool," Wolfe said mildly. "An accusation without proof is vapor, unless you dignify it." "I can't ignore it. They have witnesses, documents, all forged, but damned convincing. And now someone's warned me to keep quiet or disappear before morning." "That's not very democratic," I said. Renshaw gave me a wan look. "No, but efficient." Wolfe's brow lifted. "Who warned you?" "A woman I met through the Naval Club. She said the inquiry was already settled, that I was the scapegoat." "Names," Wolfe said. I can't give hers. She's frightened. She said she'd already done too much." Wolfe's lip curled slightly. "Then she is either a coward or an accomplice. Possibly both." He leaned back. "You were intelligence, Captain. You should know that knowledge withheld is truth murdered." I know, Renshaw murmured, but I don't want her hurt. Phooey! Wolfe's hands dropped to the chair arms. Sentiment. Useless. Mr. Goodwin, you will note, a client who values gallantry over evidence. Noted, I said. I'll file it between lost causes and unsolved murders. Renshaw's eyes flicked toward me, half grateful, half desperate. I came because I don't trust anyone else. You're the only man I ever trusted, Mr. Wolfe. That one hung in the air like smoke. Wolfe's expression didn't change, but the silence thickened. He hated that sort of appeal, anything that smelled of emotion or obligation. Still, he didn't reach for the bell cord, which meant he was hooked. Your trust, Wolfe said finally, is misplaced, but perhaps not wasted. You will, of course, pay a retainer. Renshaw nodded. Whatever you ask. I have not decided to take your case. I shall consider it. That was Wolfe's version of yes. The rain deepened outside, drumming softly. Fritz refilled the cups, then withdrew without a word. Wolfe tapped ash into the tray, eyes half-lidded. Archie, he said, you will accompany Captain Renshaw to his hotel and verify his safety. Now, I said, you realize it's nearly midnight and the sidewalks are practicing for Noah's Encore. I realize it. You have a hat. I looked at Renshaw. He was pale but steadier, like a man who'd just remembered there was such a thing as hope. All right, Captain. Let's go play follow the leader. If anyone shoots at you, duck first. Explain later. Wolfe's gaze cooled. Archie? Yes, sir? Do not be facetious with a frightened man. It is indecent. That was his version of affection. I tipped an imaginary hat and got Renshaw to his feet. In the vestibule, as I helped him with his coat, the scent hit me again. Sharp, clinical, iodine. Not what you expect from a retired naval officer who should smell like salt or cigars. I filed it away. Smells can tell stories if you let them. Outside, the city glistened under street lamps that looked tired of shining. I got him a cab on 35th, watched it pull away, and returned to the brownstone. By the time I got back, Wolfe hadn't moved more than a muscle. He looked up as I entered. Alive? So far. I left him tucked into the Regal Hotel, room 312. He says he'll meet me in the morning if he's not shot by breakfast. Wolfe closed his eyes. Hyperbole does not improve precision. Sit down. I did, taking the red chair. The office felt warmer now, the rain softer. Wolfe stared at the globe lamp, its light catching the rows of books behind him. Captain Renshaw is either a liar or a dupe, he said. If he is the latter, he may live. If the former, he will not. You sound almost fond. Nonsense, I sound awake. Friendship, Archie, is a luxury intelligence officers cannot afford. Yet he invokes it, which means he is desperate or guilty. Possibly both. Could be neither, I said. He might just be scared. Wolfe's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. Scared men rarely smell of iodine. Fetch the record file on the Naval Club and tomorrow consult Mr. Panzer. I wish to know who finances their luncheons. I pulled my notebook. You think someone's cooking the books between drinks? I think, he said, that where military honour and corporate secrecy overlap, fraud grows like fungus. Catchy. You should write for the Gazette. He ignored that as usual. Renshaw's visit was timely. The accusation implies access to documents. If he never handled them, someone used his authority. Such theft requires two things: knowledge of procedure and proximity. Meaning someone close. Precisely. You will confirm his employment history, associates, and the nature of his retirement. Anything else while I'm out getting wet? Yes. A list of recent suicides among naval clerks. Corruption rarely leaves a clean corpse. He leaned back, the cigar smoke wreathing him like a judge in his own private courtroom. For a moment the office was quiet except for the rain. You're taking this one personal, I said finally. He opened one eye. Personal? You didn't tell him to go to the devil. You're even letting me leave the house before breakfast. Archie, the man appealed to friendship. If he lies, he soils a word I hold in esteem. If he tells the truth, he is condemned by fools. Either offence demands correction. I nodded. Remind me never to call you friend in a moment of weakness. Phooey, he muttered, but softly. At midnight sharp, Fritz reappeared with a small covered tray. Wolfe's night indulgence, a demi-tasse of black coffee and a square of chocolate sponge. ritual restored. "Archie," Wolfe said as Fritz withdrew, "record tonight's events. Title, Renshaw Inquiry, Preliminary. Include the observation regarding the odour." "Iodine," I said, pulling the typewriter toward me. "Maybe he's been treating a cut." "Or scrubbing one," Wolfe murmured. The keys clacked. Outside, the rain slowed to a whisper. By the time I finished typing, Wolfe had closed his eyes again, the cigar dying in the ashtray. I looked at him, vast, still, half saint, half storm cloud, and thought of the man in the cab, alone with his fears and his iodine-scented gloves. Wolfe had said, "Consider," but I knew the case was already his. He'd never admit it, of course. For Wolfe, emotion is something to be dissected, not displayed. But I'd seen the flicker behind his eyes when Renshaw said friend. When I turned off the lamp and headed upstairs, Wolfe spoke without opening his eyes. "Archie." "Yeah?" "Tomorrow. 10 o'clock. Not before." "Yes, sir." He exhaled once. Approval, dismissal, and concern all folded into one breath. I grinned. By the time I reached the landing, I could hear the faint hiss of the radiator and the deeper silence that meant the master was thinking. I had a feeling sleep would have to wait, for both of us. And somewhere across town, in a hotel room that smelled faintly of iodine, a man who called Wolfe a friend was probably realizing that friendship can be fatal. When I came down from breakfast the next morning, the air in the office already smelled like a police precinct at closing time, cigar smoke, wet coats, and grief wrapped in procedure. Fritz had just retreated with the breakfast tray, and Wolfe was regarding his untouched coffee like it had personally offended him. That was when Inspector Kramer walked in a little after 11 without waiting for the bell. He looked like he hadn't slept. His overcoat was damp, and his cigar was chewed halfway to oblivion. I'd seen him mad, harassed, triumphant, and once even amused, but never this particular shade of grey fatigue. "Morning, Goodwin," he said, voice gravelly. "Where's His Eminence?" "Admiring bubbles," I said. "We're running low on inspiration, so he's refueling." Wolfe raised his eyes but didn't move. "Inspiration, Mr. Kramer, is not dependent on molten yeast. What, pray, has driven you here at 11:05 uninvited?" Kramer tossed a file folder onto the desk. "Your client's dead." Silence. Even the clock hesitated before ticking again. Wolfe didn't reach for the folder right away. He stared at the ceiling as if reading an indictment written in plaster. "Captain Renshaw," Wolfe said slowly. "How?" "Gunshot. Self-inflicted, according to the coroner." "According to is the coward's preface to error," Wolfe murmured. Kramer exhaled smoke through his nose. "Save the sermons. He was found in his hotel room at 7 a.m. Bellboy heard the shot, called the desk, they called us. Gun on the floor, note on the table. Everything tidy." I stepped closer and opened the folder before he could stop me. 2 photographs, black and white misery. Renshaw slumped in an armchair, his service pistol on the carpet. The note in neat block letters read, "Forgive me, I failed my country." "Nice composition," I said. "If he wanted posthumous publicity, he got it." Kramer's jaw twitched. No fingerprints on the gun. None. Not his, not anybody's. Wolfe's brows rose. "That's exceedingly clean for a man intending to die." "Wiped?" I asked. "Maybe," Kramer said. "Maybe not. We'll see when the lab's done." He lit another cigar off the stub of the first and blew smoke toward the ceiling fan, which pretended not to notice. "I didn't come for your condolences," he said. "I came because the timing stinks. He was here last night, wasn't he?" Wolfe's eyes flicked toward me. "He was." "And you claim he left alive?" I set my jaw. "He left breathing, if that's what you mean. I put him in a cab myself, Regal Hotel, room 312. You can check the doorman. If someone killed him afterward, it wasn't on our hospitality clock." Kramer grunted. "I already checked. Doorman saw him go up. Nobody saw him come down. Concierge says he got a phone call around midnight, then nothing till the shot." Wolfe leaned back, fingers steepled. "You suspect murder?" "I suspect everything," Kramer said. "But right now it's on the books as suicide. The brass want it closed fast, so I'm warning you. If you're holding anything back, I'll be back with a warrant." "That would be inconvenient," Wolfe said blandly, "and futile." Kramer looked ready to bark, but stopped himself. The lines around his mouth tightened, not in anger, in respect he didn't want to admit. He stubbed his cigar into the tray with the precision of a man throttling impulse. Fine. You think it's murder. Prove it. Till then, stay out of my way. He turned for the door, then hesitated. You know, Wolfe, for once I wish you hadn't been right to take a case. Wolfe's voice was soft. So do I. When the door closed, the room felt emptier than before. Wolfe stared at the folder without touching it. I waited for the explosion, but it didn't come. Archie, he said finally, fetch my notebook. Record. Captain Renshaw, deceased, Regal Hotel. Add subheading, the word apparent is a refuge for lazy men. Quote me precisely. Already done. I slid the notebook across. Want me to call Saul? Later. First, verify Renshaw's last movements. Meaning the Navy Club and that mystery woman you pretended not to notice last night? Precisely. Also any telegrams or calls made after he left here. I grabbed my coat. Any objection to starting with the hotel? None, except for the obvious. It will avail little. Then it's business as usual. By 12:30 I was at the Regal Hotel. The lobby was full of rubberneckers and whispering maids. Pearlie Stebbins was on guard at the door to 312, chewing gum like it owed him rent. Morning, Pearlie, I said. How's the suicide trade? He scowled. Don't start, Goodwin. The boss already chewed me out for letting you through last time. I come with good intentions and a bad umbrella. I flashed the license. Official liaison. Wolfe wants eyes. He sighed and let me in. The room smelled of cordite and air freshener, like the aftermath of an argument between life and death. The gun lay tagged on the dresser, the chair wiped clean. A bloodstain darkened the carpet beside the radiator. On the table, the note sat under glass. Neat handwriting, I said. Too neat, Pearlie grunted. Guy was left-handed, notes right slanted. Maybe he switched hands to throw us off. Yeah, Pearlie said, and maybe pigs commute by subway. I bent to look at the phone. The clerk's log said last call placed at 12:17 a.m. to a Wall Street exchange. I jotted the number. Any telegrams? I asked. He pointed to the wastebasket. One stub, sent at 9 p.m., arriving soon. Wait, E. We're tracing who E is. Good hunting. I pocketed a photostat copy and left before the gum lost flavour. At the Navy Club, the steward recognised the picture. Yes, sir, Captain Renshaw dined here around 6. Roast beef and whiskey soda. Alone till a lady joined him. Grey hat, veil. Stayed 20 minutes, left first. What did she look like? Refined. Frightened. I gave him Wolfe's card. If memory improves, call, especially if she left a name. By noon I was eating a sandwich in a midtown diner and thinking about dead men who write elegant suicide notes. The newsboys outside were already hawking it. Navy hero ends shame. The headline had all the subtlety of a punch. Wolfe would hate it. The man despised premature conclusions almost as much as warm beer. Next stop was the telegraph office. A clerk in sleeve garters confirmed a message sent to Renshaw's suite at 10:42 p.m. from a Wall Street address, Danton and Kroll Engineering. I asked about the sender. He frowned, remembering. Fellow was nervous, tapped his pen on the counter like a priest at a poker table. Didn't wait for the receipt. Tall, short, medium, fair hair, maybe 40. Wore gloves. Smelled like disinfectant. I thanked him and left with a copy of the telegram. The timestamp, 10:42 p.m., didn't jibe with Kramer's coroner report of death between 10 and midnight. Either the corpse had been writing notes posthumously, or the timeline was bent. By 2 p.m., I was back at the brownstone. Fritz let me in with a frown that said lunch had been served at 1, not whenever I decided the world could wait. Mr. Wolfe is at table, he said. He told me to say he will hear you during coffee, which, decoded, meant I was forgiven only if I didn't talk while he ate. I waited till the last fork touched the plate before starting. Your friend is headline news, I said, and your faith in human competence is, as usual, unappreciated by the NYPD. Wolfe dabbed his mouth, then gestured toward the office. We relocated, ritual intact, him in the throne, me with my notebook. I reported the neat note, the grey-hatted woman, the telegram from Danton and Kroll, the clerk's priestly metaphor, and the mismatched times. Wolfe listened with half-closed eyes. When I finished, he opened them and said, "Describe the smell in the hotel room." Gunpowder and cheap air freshener. No iodine? None. Maybe he changed perfumes. Pfui. Wolfe drummed fingers on the armrest. The note's diction, "Forgive me, I failed my country," was composed for quotation, not confession. Suicide notes are impulsive, rarely grammatical. Meaning? Meaning someone wanted his death to read well in the morning papers. I lit a cigarette. You think the woman wrote it? Possibly, but the telegram intrigues me. Danton and Kroll manufacture sonar equipment, an enterprise Renshaw once audited. Their involvement is not coincidence. Kramer won't like you sniffing around corporate brass, I said. Kramer, Wolfe said, will like the truth less, yet he will accept it. He always does. He reached for the bell cord and Fritz appeared as if conjured. Beer, Wolfe ordered. Cold, 2 glasses. Fritz nodded and withdrew. Wolfe leaned forward. Archie, call Mr. Panzer. Have him ascertain which executives at Danton and Kroll were previously stationed with naval procurement. Begin with those who enjoy gambling. Risk inclines men toward both deceit and confession. You think one of them sent the telegram? I think, he said, that a nervous man who smells of disinfectant has handled more than machinery. Fritz returned with the tray. Wolfe poured precisely, savouring the chill. He raised his glass slightly, a toast not to victory, but to irritation well earned. Kramer will return, he said. He always does, when his certainties collapse. And when he does, I asked. Then, Archie, we shall oblige him with a demonstration of why apparent suicides offend me. He took a sip, closed his eyes and leaned back, the picture of calm intellect surrounded by rainlight and cigar haze. I watched him a moment, then picked up the phone to call Saul Panzer. Outside, the city's traffic moaned like an uneasy conscience. If Captain Renshaw had failed his country, it wasn't by betrayal, it was by trusting the wrong friends. And by the sound of Wolfe's sigh, those friends were about to have a very bad day. By 11 the next morning, Tuesday, Manhattan was pretending to be innocent again. Sunshine glinting off brass elevator doors, stenographers giggling in lobbies, and the smell of fresh carbon copies thick enough to choke a conscience. I had a name, a hat colour, and an address. Danton and Kroll, Engineers of Defence, according to the etched letters on the lobby directory. The kind of firm that builds machines to keep the world safe and accountants to make sure no one knows how much it costs. Evelyn Dare's office was on the 8th floor. When I stepped out of the elevator, I was met by a corridor so polished I could see my shoes regretting yesterday's rain. The receptionist had lipstick you could signal ships with. I gave her the smile that had once talked a customs officer out of opening a suitcase in Havana. I'm here to see Miss Dare, I said. She glanced at her appointment book. Is she expecting you? She will be, I said. Tell her Archie Goodwin from Nero Wolfe's office. It's not social, but it could be pleasant. That earned me a side-eye and a phone call. A minute later I was waved through. Evelyn Dare was what the papers used to call striking. Not beautiful in the cover-girl way, too intelligent for that. Her grey hat matched the eyes that studied me, cool and quick. She wore a navy suit that said Executive Assistant, but fit like confession. Mr. Goodwin, she said, gesturing to the chair opposite her desk. You're quick. I had practice, I said, sitting. You met Captain Renshaw last night? Her hand paused over a stack of correspondence. Yes, to warn him. That's generous of you. Most people these days prefer to warn the police. She smiled, slow and tired. Captain Renshaw was being framed. I thought he deserved to know before it was too late. Too late came early this morning, I said. For a second, something flickered in her eyes. Shock, maybe guilt. Then the shutters came down. I read that in the papers. You must read fast, I said. The ink was still wet when I left the brownstone. Her fingers tightened around a pencil. I didn't kill him, Mr. Goodwin. I went to him because I heard things, conversations here at Danton and Kroll. Someone was using his name on procurement files. I don't know who. Then maybe you can tell me why your company's Wall Street office sent him a telegram at 10:42 last night. Her eyes widened just a shade too much. I wouldn't know. I don't work in that department. Sure, I said. But you work for people who do. She rose and went to the window, a trick straight out of the innocent secretary playbook. Her profile was clean, her posture better than truth's. You think I'm lying? I think you're a woman in a dangerous firm trying to stay employed. When she turned, the mask was gone. You have no idea how dangerous. I leaned back. Then give me one. She hesitated, eyes darting to her desk, and that's when I noticed it. A photograph in a silver frame turned half away, not quite hidden, not quite displayed. It showed 3 men in formal dress. One was Renshaw, the second I didn't know, and the third I couldn't see because of the angle. Before I could comment, her phone buzzed. She picked it up, murmured a yes, and her tone changed. When she hung up, she said briskly, "I'm afraid I have a meeting, Mr. Goodwin. If you'll excuse me." "I will," I said, "as soon as you tell me who's in the picture." "An old company gala, nothing important." "Everything's important until Wolfe says otherwise." Her lips twitched. "You think I'm scared of your Mr. Wolfe?" "No," I said. "I think you should be." That earned me a look that could have frozen steam. I took it as my cue to leave, but not before memorizing the exact position of that frame and the location of the nearest fire escape. Back on the street, I called Wolfe from a payphone. The rain had stopped, and the city smelled like ambition. He answered on the first ring, which meant Fritz had been ordered to fetch the instrument upstairs. "Well," he said. "She's pretty, smart, and lying through her hat." "Did you obtain the photograph?" "Not yet." "Not yet?" Wolfe's tone could curdle milk. "Mr. Goodwin, the instruction was explicit. Without engaging in athletics, not without success." She had company. "Then remove it discreetly later." "You think she'll leave her window open for me?" He sniffed. "Charm her then." "Me? Charm a woman? That's a tall order before lunch." "Archie." The single word carried enough warning to make the telephone feel heavier. "You will retrieve the photograph." "Yes, sir. And if I get arrested?" "Call Mr. Kramer. He enjoys your company." I hung up before I said what I thought of that. I waited until 4 when office buildings start shedding staff like tired snakes. At 10 past, I was back in the Danton and Kroll corridor with a paper bag and a confidence that could qualify as burglary intent. Evelyn's door was locked. Her window wasn't. A quick trip around the fire escape and a firm push got me inside. The office was dim, the city glowing beyond the blinds. I moved fast. Desk drawers all locked. File cabinet locked. But the photograph was still there, angled the same way. I lifted it carefully. It showed Renshaw smiling, hand on a champagne glass, beside a man whose face I recognized from a newspaper clipping Wolfe kept in the safe. Theodore Danton, the executive who'd skated free from a procurement scandal last year by blaming his accountant. The third man was cropped by the frame's edge, but the sleeve of his tuxedo bore a faint dark stain. I slid the photo out for a closer look. That's when I saw it. A brownish smudge near the border, faint but distinct. Iodine. Same smell that had clung to Renshaw's gloves. I wasn't alone. The door latch clicked. I slipped behind the file cabinet just as the light switched on. Evelyn entered, hat gone, eyes hard. She wasn't surprised. "I thought you might come back," she said. "I was in the neighborhood," I said, stepping out. "Nice view, terrible locks." Her hand hovered near her purse. I smiled. "If that's a gun, it's unladylike. If it's lipstick, you don't need it." She exhaled, pulled out a compact instead. "You could have asked." "I did. You changed the subject." She looked at the frame in my hand. "You shouldn't take that." "I'm not taking it. I'm borrowing it for photographic memory purposes." "Please, Mr. Goodwin, if they know you were here, who's they?" She hesitated, then whispered, "Danton, Kroll, the people behind them. You don't understand what they can do." "I'm starting to. They already killed a man who trusted them." Her shoulders trembled. "I tried to help him. I warned him." "And now you're warning me?" "Yes." "Then do it properly. Who's the third man?" "I don't know. I never saw him." "Try again." "I can't." There was real fear now. She wasn't acting or she deserved an Oscar. I set the frame down, close enough for her to think I'd left it. "All right," I said. "If you change your mind, you know the address. Big brown house, smells like orchids and arguments." She almost smiled. "You're not what I expected, Mr. Goodwin." "That's mutual." I walked out before her courage failed. Downstairs, I ducked into a camera shop and had the print copied. By 6, I was back at the brownstone. Wolfe was at his desk, surrounded by the late-day glow that made the office look like a courtroom designed by an interior decorator. "Ah," he said, seeing the envelope. "You succeeded." Against impossible odds and 2 locks, I said, handing it over. He studied the photo under the lamp. The frown came instantly. This was taken at the Navy Relief Gala, 1946. The man beside Renshaw is indeed Theodore Danton, and the partial figure, he leaned closer, Kroll, Edwin Kroll, the missing partner. He fled to Europe 2 years ago under indictment. Looks like he came home for the camera, or never left at all. He touched the corner with a paper knife, then paused. What is this discoloration? Iodine-tus, I said. Same smell as Renshaw's gloves. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. A link, but to what purpose? Maybe to clean fingerprints off the gun, I offered. Or off him, he grunted. Conjecture, yet it pleases me. The phone rang. I picked it up. Kramer's voice rasped through the wire. Tell Wolfe the coroner's report's in. Your captain didn't die at midnight, more like 1:30, and somebody moved the body afterward. Thanks, Inspector, I said. That's almost friendly. Don't get used to it. He hung up. I relayed the news. Wolfe leaned back, satisfied. The telegram was sent before Renshaw died. Therefore it was not he who replied to it. Which means someone else was in his room after he was dead. Indeed. I waited for the usual pfui, but instead he said softly, Poor fool. That sympathy or indigestion? He glared. Neither. Reflection. It is detestable when loyalty becomes a lever for corruption. Tell that to Danton and Kroll. I intend to. He pulled the bell cord. Fritz appeared. Dinner, Wolfe said, promptly at 8. Fritz nodded and vanished. Wolfe turned back to me. You will call Mr. Pantzer. He will investigate Miss Dare, her background, her finances, her associates. If she is lying, we shall know. If not, we may have found our next corpse. Comforting thought before dinner, I said. Wolfe lifted the photograph again, eyes gleaming in the lamplight. This picture was meant to flatter, but it betrays instead. Observe how Danton's hand is on Renshaw's shoulder, proprietorial, not friendly. And note Kroll's half-presence, a ghost in a business that refuses to die. He handed it back to me. Lock it in the safe. When I returned, he was already reaching for his beer. The first sip vanished in silence. Archie, he said, you will dine with me. Afterward I shall retire to the orchids. Tonight they will be preferable company to men. I grinned. That's mutual too. He ignored me, but the corner of his mouth moved, his version of a smile. Outside, the city's lights came on one by one, as if signalling a war no one had officially declared. Inside, the smell of orchids drifted down the hall, and in the office, on Wolfe's desk, the photograph of 3 smiling men lay under the lamp, betraying them all. If there's one thing that makes Saul Pantzer worth every nickel Wolfe pays him, it's that he can find the bottom of a swamp without getting his shoes wet. He came by that afternoon looking like he'd just walked out of a clean conscience. Flat cap, quiet grin, and a folder that smelled faintly of ink and trouble. 2 days' work, he said, setting it on my desk. You'll like this one, Archie. They've been buying ghosts. Ghosts? He nodded. Danton and Kroll build the Navy for sonar assemblies that don't exist. I traced 6 contracts in the last quarter, all signed with Renshaw's clearance stamp, but the parts never left the warehouse because the warehouse was empty. That's efficient, I said. You steal the money, skip the merchandise, and let the Navy blame the dead guy. Pretty much. He tipped his cap, gave me that small panzer smile that says, you'll need me again, and was gone before Wolfe finished dictating his grocery list to Fritz. I took the folder into the office. Wolfe was behind his desk, doing his best impression of a dormant volcano, still, silent, but radiating pressure. The Gazette lay open on the blotter. Lon Cohen's front-page column screamed, Navy hero turns traitor. Renshaw implicated in sonar fraud. Wolfe's expression could have curdled granite. Lon called twice, I said. Wanted comment. I told him you were cultivating restraint. Phooey, Wolfe flicked the page. A man too valuable to slander until he's safely dead. Their logic is obscene. I placed the folder before him. Panzer found the angle. The contracts are fake. 2 typewriters, same letterhead, same signatures, all Renshaw's, all forged. Wolfe's fingers touched the pages like they were evidence in a blasphemy trial. 2 machines, he murmured. One for fabrication, one for correspondence. How pedestrian. Pedestrian but profitable, I said. 6 contracts at 40 grand each. That's enough to buy loyalty and silence in bulk. Indeed. Wolfe closed the folder and stared at the ceiling as if consulting an unseen tribunal. They required Renshaw's authority to validate non-existent shipments. When he discovered it, they silenced him. And now his ghost is useful. Proof of their lie. Blamed for their theft. Nice business model, I said. You think the Navy will buy it? The Navy, Wolfe said, would prefer a convenient fiction to an inconvenient fact. As if the words had been choreographed, the bell rang at that precise moment. Fritz appeared at the door. Inspector Kramer to see you, sir. Wolfe grunted. Send him in. And, Fritz. Yes, sir. Brandy. 2 glasses. Kramer entered like a storm that had run out of thunder. Trenchcoat damp, hat low, cigar clenched. He tossed his overcoat on the rack without ceremony and dropped into the red chair. Don't get up, he said. You'll strain something. Wolfe didn't. If I thought movement would improve our conversation, I might risk it. What brings you? Kramer jabbed his cigar toward the Gazette. That damn column. Now the Navy boys are breathing down my neck to close it. They wanted official. Suicide, case shut, file buried. Wolfe poured the brandy himself, which meant he was feeling both irritated and superior. A premature burial. Typical. You think I enjoy it? Kramer growled. But I've got orders. Washington wants a clean desk before Monday. Washington, Wolfe said, has never learned arithmetic. They add conclusions before facts. Kramer snorted. You got facts, Wolfe, or just insults? Wolfe handed him a glass. Both, Mr. Kramer. Drink the one, consider the other. Kramer hesitated, then took it. You always were a lousy host. On the contrary, Wolfe said smoothly, you are the one guest who never requires rehearsal. I stayed back, watching the smoke coil between them. It was always the same dance, Wolfe's words like chess moves, Kramer's like blunt force trauma, each man too honest to fake respect but too professional to skip it. All right, Kramer said finally. Let's hear your version. Wolfe leaned back, fingers tented. Danton and Kroll fabricated contracts for sonar prototypes. Renshaw's name authenticated them. When he protested, he became inconvenient. His death served both as warning and absolution. Got proof? Enough to provoke your curiosity. He nodded at me. I handed Kramer the photostat of the invoices. He examined it, squinting. 2 different ribbons. You're right, not the same typewriter. 2 machines, Wolfe said. 2 accomplices. The forgeries were done internally. 1 machine in production, 1 in administration. Kramer took a drag on the cigar. You're telling me this outfit stole government money, killed a naval officer, and we're supposed to prove it with ribbon alignment? Hardly, Wolfe said. But you might begin there. He sipped his brandy. You see, Mr. Kramer, governments despise scandals, corporations despise exposure, and the dead cannot defend themselves. The intersection of those motives is always lethal. Spare me the sermon, Kramer said. What do you want from me? Access, Wolfe said. Your men will obtain the shipping manifests for Danton and Kroll's last 6 Navy consignments. Also, copies of all requisition forms bearing Renshaw's signature. Kramer grunted. You think I can waltz into a defense contractor's office and demand their ledgers without probable cause? I think, Wolfe replied, that if you cannot, I can find someone who will. Mr. Cohen's paper, for instance. That got a reaction. You'd use the press to blow it open? If necessary. Truth is rarely polite, but it is persuasive. Kramer finished the brandy in one gulp. You're a menace, Wolfe, a fat, immovable menace. Yet you came. He stared at Wolfe for a long second, then sighed. All right, I'll see what I can pull, but if this backfires, you can explain it to the Navy boys yourself. I would relish the challenge, Wolfe said. Kramer stood, adjusted his hat. You're lucky you're usually right. And you, Wolfe said, are lucky you know it. For a moment, they almost smiled. Then Kramer jabbed the cigar in my direction. Keep him out of trouble, Goodwin. I try, I said. He resists. When Kramer left, the silence folded back over the room like a curtain after applause. Wolfe drained his brandy, then signalled Fritz with the bell cord. Beer, he said. A glass for Mr. Goodwin as well. We have earned it. I raised an eyebrow. Teamwork? Temporarily, he said. Mr. Kramer's cooperation will last precisely as long as his patience, which is to say, briefly. He leaned back, eyes half closed. Nevertheless, the tide turns. The firm's shadow lengthens, and those who profit from darkness will soon regret the dawn. Poetic, I said. You should write headlines for Lon Cohen. Phooey, he muttered. Fritz arrived with the tray. The beer was cold, the silence civilized. Outside, the city hummed its late afternoon tune, typewriters, taxis, and distant sirens harmonizing under the smell of spring rain and newsprint. Wolfe lifted his glass. To arithmetic done properly, he said. I clinked mine against it. And to the day the government learns how to count. By 11:20 that morning, the brownstone had the quiet of a library that's about to be robbed. Wolfe was behind his desk with a ruler, a sheet of graph paper, and a cigar the size of municipal corruption. He was charting timelines, his favourite way to pretend the universe could be managed with geometry. Captain Renshaw leaves the brownstone at 11:15, he murmured, pencil hovering. He dies between 12 and 1:30. Between those hours, who profits? I'd like to know, I said, but so would Kramer, and he's got more men and worse manners. Before Wolfe could reply, the phone rang. I picked it up. Kramer's voice came through, short and sharp. Tell Wolfe his timeline just got crowded. We've got another body, Evelyn Dare. Wolfe's hand froze midair. How? Strangled, Kramer said. Her apartment. Looks like remorse. I'm letting Goodwin in, but tell him one wrong move and I'll throw him out the window. He hung up. Wolfe's face stayed still, but his eyes darkened. Remorse, he muttered. The universal solvent of lazy detectives. Go. The day was grey enough to make angels yawn. At West 57th Street, half the building was craning its necks while pearly Stebbins kept them at bay. He scowled when he saw me. Kramer's upstairs, he said, and keep your hands in your pockets. Always do, I said, except when I shake yours. Upstairs, the door was open and the smell hit first. Perfume over burnt paper, an odd mix of vanity and fear. Evelyn Dare lay near the divan, her grey hat tossed aside, face turned toward the window as if looking for help that came too late. A silk scarf was twisted tight around her throat. Kramer stood by the mantel, cigar unlit but working between his teeth. You get 5 minutes, he said. Don't move anything. I never move anything unless it's alive, I said. He grunted. Looks like she burned her confession. We found paper ash in the grate and a matchbook from the St. Regis. I looked around. The place was tidy. Too tidy. The typewriter cover was on, the desk cleared except for one glass of water and a single cigarette butt in an ashtray. The smell of scorched paper lingered like guilt. Who found her? I asked. Neighbour. Heard the radio on since midnight. Door wasn't locked. Any sign of struggle? None. If it's murder, it's neat work. He turned toward me, squinting. You talked to her yesterday. Did she strike you as suicidal? Only in her choice of company, I said. That earned me a sigh. Kramer gestured to the desk. You can look, but don't touch more than your conscience. I scanned the grate. Most of the ashes were fine powder, but one curl of half-burned photo paper clung to the edge. I used my penknife to nudge it free and saw faint writing on the back. Neat, crisp strokes that could have come straight from Wolfe's blotter. T case file, locked. I showed it to Kramer. You ever see her write like that? He frowned. No, and don't start implying your boss writes notes to dead secretaries. Wouldn't dream of it, I said. He'd never abbreviate. Still, I slipped the fragment into an envelope for the record and handed it over. I wasn't risking Wolfe's wrath over chain of evidence. Kramer pocketed it, watching me. You really think she was murdered? I think strangling yourself takes more cooperation than one person's got. He didn't smile, but the cigar paused. Get out before I start agreeing with you. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was waiting, eyes half shut but mind at full gallop. Fritz had just brought lunch, which meant the timing was unfortunate. Wolfe doesn't like tragedy served with tomato aspic. Well, he demanded. She's dead, I said. Perfume, paper ashes, scarf around the neck. Kramer says suicide. I say he's tired. Wolfe exhaled slowly, like a volcano considering its options. Describe precisely. I did, ending with a note fragment. Wolfe's lids snapped open. You are certain it resembled my hand? Enough that I did a double take. He pushed back from the desk and stood, a rare event that makes the furniture nervous. Archie, that fragment was planted. By who? Someone acquainted with my stationery and my reputation. The implication is obvious, that I corresponded with her, that she possessed something of mine, perhaps damning. It is an insult so clumsy it approaches art. He paced once, stopped, and rang the bell cord. Fritz appeared, concerned. Yes, sir? Coffee, strong, and send a message to Mr. Pantzer, Mr. Durkin, and Mr. Cather. They will report here at 4 o'clock. Fritz nodded and vanished. You're calling the full orchestra? I asked. That's rare. This situation, Wolfe said, requires volume. Evelyn Dare was not killed for what she did, but for what she knew. Someone fears absence, not exposure. She discovered what was missing. The missing sonar equipment? Precisely. The invoices Panzer uncovered refer to materials never shipped. She must have found proof of that absence, a contradiction in the ledgers perhaps. When she warned Renshaw, they both became liabilities. I whistled softly. So whoever forged your stationery wanted to add you to the liability list? Possibly, he said, though I am less tractable than Captain Renshaw or Miss Dare. That's one way to describe weighing a quarter ton. His eyes narrowed, but there was no bite. Archie, you will dictate the following. To Inspector Kramer, the death of Miss Evelyn Dare is no more suicide than was Caesar's. Consider the possibility that her silence was arranged, not chosen. You want me to mail that or hand-deliver it with a bow? Mail it. Let the post office earn its keep. As I typed, Wolfe moved to the globe stand and poured himself a half-inch of brandy, which meant his irritation had crossed the border into strategy. Do you think Kramer will bite? I asked. He will scoff, then investigate, then concede. He is a man of action, not imagination, yet the two are occasionally compatible. The bell rang downstairs. I checked the clock, 4 on the dot. Saul Panzer first, trim and quiet. Fred Durkin behind him, heavier than optimism. Ori Cather last, slick as a Sunday suit. Wolfe greeted them with a nod. Gentlemen, I require information. Mr. Pantzer, determine who at Danton and Kroll handled inventory reconciliation for the sonar contracts. Mr. Durkin, find out who Miss Dare was scheduled to meet last evening. Mr. Cather, trace any purchase of typewriter ribbons or stationery matching my own within the last week. Ori smirked. You think somebody's imitating you? I think, Wolfe said, that someone is attempting to exploit my distinction, a peril of prominence. He dismissed them with a wave, then turned to me. Archie, dinner at 8 as usual. Until then, type a memorandum for tomorrow's record. 2 dead, 1 defamed, 1 offended. That will suffice for the day. I rolled the paper into the machine. What heading shall I use? He eyed the cigar smoke curling toward the ceiling. Truth silenced by fear. When Fritz reappeared to announce dinner, Wolfe sank back into his chair, mood unreadable. I closed the typewriter, knowing better than to add another wisecrack. He spoke at last, softly. Archie, protect the evidence. Whoever forged that paper intends escalation. Meaning they'll come for you? For us, he corrected. That was Wolfe for affection. When Inspector Kramer barges into Wolfe's office, the weather in the room changes faster than a March forecast. I'd just poured Wolfe's second beer of the afternoon, the sacred hour between orchids and dinner prep, when the front door slammed hard enough to make the beer foam resentfully. Fritz gave me a look that said, "You deal with it," and vanished toward the kitchen. Kramer came in, chewing his cigar like it had betrayed him personally. His hat was under one arm, his coat half-buttoned, and his face wore that New York shade of grey reserved for men whose patience had been subpoenaed. "All right, Wolfe," he barked. "I'm done dancing. I've got warrants. 1 for the Dare girl's apartment, 1 for Danton and Kroll, and 1 for you if you so much as stall me." I leaned back in my chair. "Afternoon, Inspector. Always a pleasure when the law knocks politely." He shot me a glare that could melt paper clips. "You shut up, Goodwin. This time I'm not bluffing." Wolfe didn't even blink. He sat there, monumental and serene, hands resting on the chair arms, cigar smoke wreathing him like a saint with bad habits. "Mr. Kramer," he said, "I have often admired your zeal. It would serve the city better if it were not forever misdirected." Kramer slapped a folded paper on the desk. "You can admire this too. It authorizes me to seize anything related to your dead naval hero and the woman you conveniently forgot to warn." Phooey, Wolfe muttered. Your warrant, Inspector, authorizes futility. You would find only the detritus of logic, which, unlike your evidence, is invisible. I couldn't help it. I grinned. The sight of Kramer trying to outstare Wolfe was always worth the admission. The man looked like a rhino attempting to intimidate a cathedral. Look, Kramer growled, pacing. Washington wants this closed by Monday. They're saying suicide for both. The Navy boys are leaning on the DA, and the DA's leaning on me. You're sitting on material evidence. You'll turn it over, or I'll make you. Make me? Wolfe's eyebrows twitched upward. You'd need heavier artillery and fewer illusions. Kramer planted both fists on the desk. You think I won't do it? I think, Wolfe said calmly, that you've already decided not to. Were you here to enforce, you would have brought Mr. Stebbins and 2 patrolmen, not your temper. You came, as always, for truth, however reluctantly. For a moment, it was silent, except for the faint tick of the wall clock. Then Kramer straightened, took a long pull on the cigar, and exhaled. You're lucky you're usually right. Wolfe inclined his head. A condition that serves us both. I cut in. If you boys are through measuring moral fibre, maybe we can get to the reason he's here. What's really got your goat, Inspector? Kramer jabbed the cigar at me. Those contracts your pet detective found. Panzer. The forgeries are too clean. If the girl didn't type them, who did? Because someone did, and that someone's walking free. Wolfe tapped ash delicately into the tray. Indeed, that someone, I believe, employed an early form of electronic replication, a process for duplicating signatures using conductive filament and current. Crude, but effective. Observe. He reached into a folder and withdrew a sheet, one of the fake invoices Panzer had photographed. The paper shimmered faintly under the desk lamp. Wolfe handed me his magnifier. Note the discoloration, he said. A faint burn along the curve of Renshaw's signature. That is no ink imperfection. It is an electric arc scar. A duplication, not a forgery in the traditional sense. Kramer frowned. You're saying they used a machine to fake it in 1948? Wolfe allowed himself a small smile. The ingenuity of corruption, Inspector, keeps excellent pace with technology. Kramer stared at the sheet, then back at Wolfe. You've got proof of this? The proof, Wolfe said, is in your hand. The equipment required is specialized, an electronic engraving duplicator. Danton and Kroll use precisely 2, both maintained by an engineer named Terence Cole. He has been absent since the morning after Captain Renshaw's death. That did it. Kramer's cigar paused halfway to his mouth. Cole's missing? Vanished, Wolfe said, presumably to avoid explaining why his employer's invoices bear electric burn marks identical to those made by his duplicator. I added, if you hurry, you might catch him buying a one-way ticket to anywhere but here. Kramer grunted. We already checked his rooming house. Empty. Then, Wolfe said, perhaps you should check the Hudson. Kramer's jaw tightened. You think he's dead? I think he's inconvenient, Wolfe said, and Danton and Kroll do not tolerate inconvenience. The inspector stood silent a moment, chewing on that thought, then dropped into the red chair. Damn it. If you're right, it means the Navy's been swindled out of $500,000, and my bosses are busy rubber-stamping suicide reports. Wolfe nodded gravely. Hence my reluctance to let you rummage through my files. Cooperation under such circumstances would be a breach of reason. I protect my evidence as you protect your badge. Yeah, well, Kramer muttered. Mine doesn't weigh a quarter ton. I laughed. Wolfe didn't. He poured brandy instead. Inspector, you and I have always differed in methods, but not in aim. Justice is our mutual mistress. She is, alas, temperamental. You must endure her tantrums. I, her silences. Kramer accepted the glass Wolfe offered, though he grumbled about it. You make speeches like a senator, but you've got a point. I can't close this case without more. Then do not close it, Wolfe said. Delay. Stall. Report procedural review. Meanwhile, my men will locate Cole, or what remains of him. Kramer drank. You're assuming I'll let you keep working this. I am assuming, Wolfe said mildly, that you prefer competence to compliance. That earned a grudging snort. You know what? Sometimes I think you should have worn a badge. Then I remember the paperwork. Wolfe smiled. The uniform would have been intolerable. He reached for the bell cord. Fritz appeared at once, quiet as a ghost in a dinner jacket. "Fritz," Wolfe said, "refresh the inspector's glass." "No thanks," Kramer said, standing. "If I stay, I'll start agreeing with you, and that's bad for morale." Wolfe inclined his head. "Then we part as gentlemen." Kramer paused at the door. "If I get heat from upstairs, I'll tell them I'm waiting on your report. Don't make me a liar." "I would not dream of it," Wolfe said. When he'd gone, the silence swelled back like a tide. Wolfe turned to me. "Archie, make a note. Inspector Kramer, today at 3, refrained from executing a warrant. The world improves slightly." "Sure," I said, picking up my notebook. "And should I add that he almost smiled?" "That," Wolfe said, "would strain credibility." He leaned back, eyes half closed. "Bring the beer." "Reward for surviving Kramer?" "For enduring him," Wolfe corrected. "A more arduous task." As Fritz returned with the tray, I handed Wolfe his glass. The bubbles rose like well-earned applause. "Justice versus authority," I said. "You two make quite a duet." He sipped. "Phooey. Justice sings, authority merely hums along off-key." And with that, he closed his eyes. The case files spread before him, the faint smell of burnt paper and brandy mingling under the late afternoon light. By the time I got to Terence Cole's boarding house, the place smelled like every bad decision that ever paid rent. It was one of those midtown structures that leaned in sympathy with its tenants. 4 floors of peeling wallpaper, shared bathrooms, and enough stale smoke to pickle a conscience. The landlady, a woman shaped like a donut left too long in the fryer, met me at the door with a feather duster and suspicion. "You're too late," she said before I'd even opened my mouth. "Story of my life," I told her. "When did he check out?" "Didn't. Just gone. Door open, bed half made, no suitcase." "Police been here?" she sniffed. "If they had, maybe I'd get some peace. He left last night, I think. Or this morning. Hard to say when a man's quiet." "Cole always quiet?" "Too quiet for a man who works with machines." She folded her arms. "You law?" "Something like that," I said, and slipped her a 5. It worked faster than a badge. Room 3B was at the end of a hall with peeling paint that looked like abstract art by termites. The window was open, the bed unmade, and the air smelled faintly of machine oil and fear. The only sound was a soft, steady ticking from under the bed. I crouched down and found it, a Navy-issue wristwatch, brass casing, face cracked but still ticking like it didn't care about missing owners. I flipped it over and caught the faint glint of something scratched inside the back cover. 47 DK. It wasn't initials, too bureaucratic for that. More like a code, the kind you find on invoices or shipment logs. I pocketed the watch and took one last look around. The dresser drawers were empty, the wastebasket clean. Whoever left had done it carefully, but not thoroughly enough. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was in the office in full post-orchid gloom. He was seated like a throne-bound Buddha of exasperation, the magnifying glass already in his hand as if he'd been expecting me to return with a mystery wrapped in brass. I handed him the watch. "Our boy Cole skipped town, but left us a souvenir." He peered through the glass. "A Navy issue," he said. "Regulation markings, late model, acquired legitimately or otherwise. And the engraving reads 47 DK. He grunted, the sound of a mind shifting into gear. "Danton and Kroll." "Shipment number?" "Undoubtedly. Mr. Pantzer will confirm it." He pressed the bell cord, and Fritz appeared almost instantly, napkin still over one arm. "Beer," Wolfe said. "For me. Ginger ale for Mr. Goodwin, since he appears to have survived the boarding house intact." Fritz nodded and departed with a look that said he considered both beverages beneath him. Wolfe turned the watch over again. The man fled without this. Curious. Engineers are precise by nature. They do not abandon time lightly. "Maybe he had a fast train to catch," I said, "or someone made sure he didn't need to wind it again." That got me a brief glance, the Wolfe version of a gasp. "You think him dead?" "I think he's less punctual than his watch." Fritz returned with the drinks, and Wolfe dismissed him with a nod. He leaned back, glass in hand, eyes closed. That's Wolfe's version of full gallop, thinking so hard you can almost hear the mental gears creak. "Archie," he said after a moment, "write a memorandum to Mr. Pantzer. The engraving on the watch, 47 DK, may correspond to an invoice number. Have him verify immediately." "Sure," I said. "Want it polite or pushy?" "Efficient," he said. which in Wolf's language means pushy with punctuation. I typed it out, sent it by messenger, and by the time Fritz announced dinner, the reply had arrived. Panzer's note was brief. Shipment 47DK registered as sonar relay parts for Navy use. Invoice signed by Renshaw. No physical delivery. Records show Terence Cole as verifying engineer. I read it aloud. Wolf's only reaction was to close his eyes again. That, he said quietly, concludes the circle. Renshaw's forged authority, Miss Dare's warning, and Mr. Cole's disappearance, all tethered to the same fraudulent shipment. The watch is our proof of proximity. Proximity to what? To guilt, Wolfe said, or to murder, depending on one's vantage. Dinner was trout meunière, Fritz's idea of subtle revenge against the working man's appetite. We ate in near silence, which is to say Wolfe ate, and I pretended to. His fork moved with the kind of precision most surgeons would envy. "Something bothering you," I said finally. "And it's not the trout. Spill it." Wolfe didn't look up. "Mr. Goodwin, sentiment is an affliction best left to poets, yet occasionally it intrudes upon reason." "Meaning what?" He set down his fork. "A friend deserves vindication, even posthumously." "Renshaw," I said. "Of course Renshaw. He was foolish, impulsive, and entirely too loyal, but he was not a traitor." "That'll make a fine epitaph," I said. "We can carve it on the Navy file if we ever find it." He ignored that. "When one dies with his honour maligned, those who remain must restore it. That is the only reparation within reach of mortals." "That and catching whoever killed him," I said, "though you seem to be enjoying your moral crisis more than the chase." That earned me a glare sharp enough to slice the trout. "Archie, your levity is seldom edifying." "Yeah, but it keeps the room from turning into a morgue." For a while we just sat, me with my ginger ale, Wolfe with his thoughts, the office beyond the dining room dim under the evening lamps. The city hummed faintly through the windows, a taxi horn, a distant siren, the steady pulse of a place too busy to mourn. Wolfe finally pushed his plate aside. "Tomorrow at 10 we proceed. Saul will track Cole's last communication. Mr. Durkin will revisit the boarding house. You will consult the Navy Procurement Office, discreetly." "Discreetly meaning no wisecracks?" "Meaning no arrests," he said. "Wisecracks are unavoidable." Fritz appeared in the doorway again, wordless as always when Wolfe's face went stone cold with purpose. "Coffee, sir?" "No," Wolfe said. "Brandy. Mr. Goodwin will join me." That last part was a surprise. Wolfe doesn't share brandy unless he's feeling something too human for beer to handle. He poured a modest inch for each of us, and the silence that followed was less heavy than before, like the air after a storm that hasn't decided whether to pass. He raised his glass slightly. "To persistence," he said. I clinked mine. "And to sentiment, properly disguised as justice." Wolfe's lips twitched, which for him counts as laughter. "Phooey," he murmured, but didn't deny it. The clock ticked on, steady, stubborn, and indifferent, like Cole's abandoned watch, still counting seconds for a man who might never see another. The morning started with Wolfe refusing breakfast conversation and me refusing to be bored. When a man of his bulk goes silent, it's less like peace and more like weather before thunder. I'd been sitting at my desk with a ginger ale, flipping through the Gazette, when inspiration or mischief struck. "Wolfe," I said, "how would you feel about becoming a media sensation?" He looked up from his chair, expression glacial. "Mr. Goodwin, if you're proposing I participate in a publicity gambit, please reconsider before I acquire apoplexy." "Not publicity," I said. "Strategy. You said yesterday the guilty avoid sunlight. How about we make them squint?" His eyes narrowed, which for Wolfe is the same as most people standing and applauding. "Continue." "Simple," I said. "We leak a story to the Gazette that you're hosting a press conference tomorrow, promising to name the man behind the Navy fraud. The guilty party won't wait for the show. He'll try to stop the act." Wolfe leaned back, fingertips touching. "A crude lure." "Sure," I said, "but we're fishing for sharks, not trout." He grunted, and that was the closest thing to approval I'd get before lunch. By 11, I was at the Gazette office on 43rd, waving to Lon Cohen through the glass wall of his smoke-filled newsroom. He looked up, saw me, and sighed like a man about to be accused of something. "Archie," he he said, when I slid into his office. "Every time you walk in, I smell trouble." "That's my cologne. Listen, I need a small favour. Strictly above board, below conscience." Lon took off his glasses. "This about Wolfe's Navy thing, I've been chasing crumbs on it all week." "Then you'll love this loaf," I said. "Run a line on page 2. Nero Wolfe to announce identity of Defence Leaks culprit. Exclusive conference at Brownstone tomorrow. No quotes, no denials, just bait." Lon frowned. "He's actually naming names?" "Only in the heads of those who can't afford to hear them," I said. He stared, then grinned. "You're setting a hook." "Biggest one in Manhattan," I said. "Make it sound solid, like you've seen a written statement." "Can I at least warn the city editor?" "Sure," I said, "after you print it." By 2 o'clock the presses were rolling, and by 4 Wolfe's phone was already ringing more than a Broadway box office. Most were reporters fishing for details. One, however, was different. Male, smooth voice, precise diction. "This is Mr. Sloane," the caller said, "legal counsel for Danton and Kroll. We understand Mr. Wolfe may have information concerning our firm. Might I visit to clarify any misunderstandings?" I looked at Wolfe. He nodded once. "Come ahead," I said. 7 o'clock. When I hung up, Wolfe opened one eye. "A lawyer. Excellent. Of all vermin, they scurry fastest when the floorboards creak." At 6:57 the doorbell rang. Fritz answered. I heard the polite murmur of coats and hats being surrendered. Then Fritz ushered in Mr. Sloane. Tall, thin, polished, the kind of man who never wrinkles even when lying. He carried a briefcase and the self-confidence of someone who'd billed the Navy for it. "Mr. Wolfe," he said, bowing slightly, "I appreciate your time." "Time," Wolfe said, "is a commodity few afford. Be seated." Sloane sat, crossing one leg with elegant caution. That's when I saw it. The gleam of a gold cufflink shaped like an engineer's compass, engraved R&F Engineering. He noticed me looking. "A gift," he said lightly. "A client's token." "R&F Engineering," Wolfe murmured. "A subcontractor to Danton and Kroll, if I recall correctly." Sloane smiled thinly. "Indeed, a small subsidiary." Wolfe gestured. "Proceed. Why have you come?" Sloane opened his briefcase with ceremony. "We're aware that Mr. Goodwin, acting as your agent, has been inquiring about our contracts with the Navy. I'm here to prevent unnecessary embarrassment for all parties." "Embarrassment," Wolfe said, "is seldom mutual. Define yours." The lawyer's smile tightened. "Our firm has been subjected to wild accusations regarding procurement irregularities. You, sir, are a man of discretion. We would prefer this matter remain unpublished." "Unpublished," Wolfe repeated. An odd euphemism for concealed. "Call it settled, then." Sloane placed an envelope on the desk. "A gesture of goodwill to ensure no further misunderstanding between us." I said, "We don't do misunderstandings. We sell clarity." Sloane ignored me. "My superiors are prepared to offer a confidential arrangement, compensation for time, inconvenience, and any unverified material that might mislead the press." Wolfe's voice chilled. "You presume, sir, that I may be bought." "Not at all," Sloane said quickly. "Merely compensated for restraint." "Restraint," Wolfe said, "is not my profession." The silence stretched. I watched him squirm, a small, delicious thing. Finally, Wolfe spoke. "You mentioned superiors. Whom do you represent precisely?" Sloane hesitated. "Danton and Kroll's board has authorized me." "Name," Wolfe interrupted. "Specificity is a lawyer's virtue, is it not?" Sloane dabbed his brow. "Mr. Alfred Danton, senior partner." Wolfe nodded slightly, satisfied, then rang the bell cord. Fritz appeared instantly. "Beer," Wolfe said. "And bring Mr. Sloane coffee, if his conscience permits caffeine." Sloane coloured. "This is unnecessary." "On the contrary," Wolfe said. "It's customary. You attempt bribery. I offer refreshment." I had to bite my lip to keep from grinning. Wolfe went on, voice smooth as an indictment. "You said unverified material. You imply forgery or fabrication. You are therefore aware of falsified Navy documents under your client's purview." Sloane blinked. No, I meant rumours." "Phooey," Wolfe said sharply. "Spare me the wriggling. Either you know the truth or you are a professional idiot." Which is it? He stood that, barely. I'm merely doing my duty as counsel. Then perform it elsewhere, Wolfe said. You will receive an invitation shortly. This evening, 9 o'clock. Bring Mr. Danton. Inspector Kramer will also attend. You may find candour less painful in company. Sloane rose, pale but trying to smile. If you're implying formal charges, I imply nothing, Wolfe said. I demonstrate. Good evening. Fritz reappeared to escort him out. The door clicked shut behind, leaving the faint smell of expensive cologne and moral bankruptcy. I whistled softly. That went well. He almost offered to buy us dinner. Wolfe ignored me. He was gazing at the cufflink glinting on the table. Sloane had dropped it while reaching for the envelope. Wolfe picked it up delicately. R&F Engineering, he said again. A subcontractor handling prototype fabrication for Danton and Kroll's sonar project. The missing shipments were theirs. You think Cole worked for them directly? I think Mr. Cole's corpse, when found, will answer that. That wasn't the cheeriest forecast. I decided to focus on logistics. So tonight we're hosting a party, Kramer, Danton, and our bribing friend. Precisely, Wolfe said. An evening of enforced honesty. Mr. Kramer shall be delighted. Delighted's not the word I'd use. At 8:45, Kramer arrived first, his mood exactly as predicted. He stomped in, tossed his hat on the rack, and glared at Wolfe. What's this about a press circus? I've had 3 calls from Washington asking if you've gone insane. Reassure them, Wolfe said. I was born that way. Kramer grunted. You better not be wasting my time. I'm still covering 2 homicides you've turned into riddles. They are not riddles, Wolfe said. They are arithmetic. Tonight, we balance the sum. By 9 o'clock that evening, the brownstone felt less like home and more like a courthouse with better upholstery. The office lights burned low, golden against the dusk outside. Fritz had closed the curtains tight, and the air held that pre-storm stillness Wolfe always seemed to generate before detonating a truth. The desk gleamed like a polished altar, and Wolfe himself looked like the presiding deity, massive, calm, and irrefutably in charge. Kramer was already there, planted in the red chair like a bulldog in a dentist's office, chewing an unlit cigar with the determination of a man who intended to grind justice into flavour. Across from him sat Alfred Danton and his lawyer, Mr. Sloane, the picture of businessmen caught in the wrong chapter of a morality play. Sloane was pale, his tie knotting itself under pressure. Danton sat with the offended dignity of a man who still believed money could bribe reason. I took my usual perch at the side table, notebook ready, because somebody had to record the proceedings for the benefit of history, or the DA's office, whichever needed it first. Wolfe didn't begin immediately. He let the silence stretch, fat and tense. That was one of his favourite weapons, and I'd seen it work better than a loaded pistol. When he finally spoke, the sound was as smooth as brandy, and twice as dangerous. Gentlemen, he said, this office is not a tribunal of law, but tonight it will serve one of truth. The distinction may discomfort you. Danton shifted. We came here under protest. Wolfe's eyes flicked open, dark and steady. A protest implies injustice, Mr. Danton. You fear exposure, which is not the same thing. Kramer grunted. Get on with it, Wolfe. My patience clocks out in 15 minutes. It will require 10, Wolfe said. Mr. Goodwin, the folder, please. I handed it over. Wolfe laid it before him like a judge placing the Bible. Here, he began, are the forged invoices authorizing sonar relay equipment supposedly shipped to naval depots in Norfolk and Charleston. No such deliveries occurred, yet the payments cleared, $500,000 in taxpayers' tribute. The signatures authenticating those invoices bear the name of Captain Charles Renshaw. Kramer interrupted. Renshaw's dead. You're saying he faked his own name. I am saying, Wolfe replied, that his name was faked for him. The technique was electrical duplication, his signature burned into document stock using a conductive filament. That filament belonged to the duplicator maintained by Mr. Terence Cole, engineer at Danton and Kroll's subcontractor, R&F Engineering. Danton barked, This is ridiculous. Cole's gone missing. That hardly proves— Missing? Wolfe leaned forward slightly. Yes, indeed. Missing men are convenient, are they not? Sloane's voice cracked. You have no evidence of foul play. Wolfe ignored him. Cole did not abscond. He was removed. Miss Evelyn Dare discovered the falsified records, confronted Cole, and was herself silenced. Mr. Cole followed her shortly thereafter. 2 deaths tidily erased under the illusion of flight and despair. I saw Kramer's jaw tighten. You're accusing Danton's outfit of killing both? I am accusing, Wolfe said softly, this man's agent. He turned his gaze to Sloane. The lawyer stiffened. That's absurd. Absurdity, Wolfe said, is often the last refuge of guilt before it confesses. He reached into his drawer and withdrew a small velvet pouch. Out came a single cufflink, Sloane's twin to the one he'd conveniently left behind earlier that day. It gleamed like gold, but carried the weight of a verdict. I took the liberty, Wolfe said, of examining its mate, which you so carelessly abandoned here. The workmanship is exquisite. R&F Engineering, your client's subsidiary. But what truly distinguishes it is not its exterior polish, but its interior. He handed it to me. Mr. Goodwin, the screwdriver, if you please. I'd been waiting for that cue since dinner. I produced the tiny jeweller's tool Wolfe kept for such moments and twisted the cufflink open. Inside, rolled tighter than a cigarette, was a strip of microfilm. Wolfe gestured. Show the inspector. I passed it to Kramer. He squinted, grunted, then nodded slowly. Looks like documents. I'll need a magnifier. Of course, Wolfe said. Those are the original authentic signature templates, Renshaw's duplicated from Navy records. Mr. Sloane kept them as leverage, proof of his control over the scheme. Without them, Danton could deny knowledge. With them, Sloane could ensure obedience. Kramer let out a low whistle. You mean the lawyer ran the racket, not the company? Precisely, Wolfe said. Mr. Danton, for all his moral frailty, merely permitted corruption. Mr. Sloane orchestrated it. He falsified the invoices, directed Cole's engineering modifications, and disposed of anyone threatening exposure. He used his client's firm as shield and scapegoat. Sloane was sweating now, eyes darting between us. This is insane. You planted that cufflink. I leaned forward. Sure, we break into your jewelry box between lunch and beer time. Kramer snapped. Shut up, Goodwin. Yes, sir, I said cheerfully. Wolfe continued, unbothered. Mr. Sloane, your protest would be more credible if not for the engraving of your initials, identical on both cufflinks. You carried your crimes on your sleeve. Sloane lunged forward, grabbing for the evidence. Kramer was faster. He caught the lawyer's wrist and twisted it down with professional economy. That's enough, Kramer said grimly. You're staying put. For a moment, nobody moved. The air thickened with the smell of fear and cigar smoke. Then Wolfe spoke again, quieter, but sharper. You murdered Captain Renshaw to preserve your scheme. You staged his guilt, used his name to channel funds, and framed his conscience as camouflage. Miss Dare discovered your deception. She intended to expose it to the Navy auditors. You visited her that evening with assurances of protection and left her strangled. Mr. Cole attempted flight. You retrieved his body before morning. Both victims now rest beneath bureaucratic excuses, which the inspector will soon exhume. Sloane sagged, his defiance leaking out like air from a punctured tire. You can't prove I killed them. Kramer's tone was dry as chalk. Wolfe's already done the heavy lifting. I'll find the rest. Indeed you will, Wolfe said. Panzer followed your movements after you left this office. You visited a safety deposit vault at the Gotham Bank, box number 612. I expect you will find correspondence there connecting you to R&F Engineering's shell accounts. Sloane groaned. Danton, to his credit or cowardice, turned pale and muttered, You fool! You've ruined us. Wolfe raised a hand. Mr. Danton, you are culpable by negligence, not by design. The law will judge the degree. I suggest cooperation as a tonic. Kramer stood. I'll have my men here in 15 minutes. Wolfe, for once, I owe you one. Wolfe inclined his head. Your acknowledgement suffices. I seek no gratitude, only silence after 9. Kramer allowed himself half a grin. You and your damn chair tricks. Every time I think you're bluffing, you pull another rabbit out of a witness. Phooey, Wolfe muttered. If I relied on rabbits, I'd go hungry. Kramer motioned to Sloane. Sit tight till my men arrive. When they left the office, Kramer to make his calls, Danton to stare at the floor as if expecting it to swallow him, Wolfe exhaled, leaning back with a sigh that made the chair complain. "Well," I said, "that was lively. You might have warned me we'd be running a full courtroom tonight. I'd have brought popcorn." "Frivolity," Wolfe said, "is for men unburdened by thought." "Sure," I said, "but it's cheaper than therapy." He didn't bite. He just gestured toward the discarded cufflink still glinting under the lamp. "Observe, Archie. Vanity, the need to adorn oneself, is often the telltale flaw of intellect. Were he content with plain brass, Mr. Sloane might still be free." "Noted," I said. "I'll switch to stainless steel." Fritz appeared quietly at the doorway, as if conjured by the cessation of battle. "Gentlemen, dinner is served." "Thank heaven," I said. "I was starting to think we'd starve for justice." "Justice," Wolfe said, heaving himself up, "is never nourishing, merely necessary." As he crossed to the dining room, I followed, notebook tucked under my arm. "You realize," I said, "Kramer's going to take half the credit in tomorrow's papers." "That," Wolfe said, "is his profession. Mine is correctness." Fritz pulled out Wolfe's chair and poured the beer, the golden bubbles rising with ecclesiastical grace. Wolfe raised the glass slightly before tasting. "To loyalty," he said. "Whose?" I asked. He met my gaze. "Yours, Mr. Goodwin, the only kind not masquerading tonight." I grinned. "Careful, you'll spoil my reputation." He snorted softly and took another drink. Outside, the city murmured on, indifferent to guilt or innocence. Inside the brownstone, order had been restored. The orchids would get their morning caretaker, the beer its chilled glass, and Wolfe his peace. At least until the next idiot knocked after hours. The sun hadn't made up its mind yet. Manhattan was in that grey limbo between night and morning, the kind of light that makes you question your life choices, especially if your life involves cleaning up after other people's crimes. The city outside the brownstone sounded half asleep, a milk truck whining down 35th, the newspaper boy testing his arm on the stoop, and a pigeon with bad timing cooing near the window ledge. Inside, the only thing awake was Nero Wolfe's mind, and possibly Fritz's sense of punctuality. The smell of coffee had barely faded when he came in with a tray. "Orange juice, Fritz. You're raising standards. What happened to the beer for morale?" "Mr. Wolfe requested this," Fritz said primly, setting the tray on Wolfe's desk. "I see," I said. "So, we're drinking to insomnia." "Phooey," Wolfe muttered, without opening his eyes. He was slouched in his oversized chair, the morning paper unopened beside him, hands folded like a disappointed emperor. His face looked carved from marble that had decided to retire. Fritz poured with the solemnity of a high mass, set the first glass within reach, and left. The door clicked behind him, shutting out the civilized world. I sat down and leaned back. "So, the city's top lawyer in cuffs, the company dissolved and the Navy's honour restored. Not bad for one evening's work. You planning to gloat before breakfast or after?" Wolfe's eyelids lifted a fraction. "You presume I indulge in gloating." "I've seen you gloat," I said. "It looks a lot like digestion." He ignored that. "Inspector Kramer telephoned at 6. He reports Mr. Sloane has confessed to both homicides and to falsifying the contracts. Mr. Danton will be arraigned as accessory to fraud." I nodded. "Efficient clean-up. You should send him an orchid." "Justice," Wolfe said, "requires no flowers." "Maybe not," I said, "but it wouldn't kill you to enjoy the view from the moral high ground. It's rare air up there." His eyes opened fully now, grey and still. "Archie, your levity is misplaced. 2 lives were extinguished to protect a fiction. Another, Renshaw, was extinguished before it began." I whistled softly. "That's sentiment talking. Didn't know you let it out before noon." "Don't be impertinent." "I'm not," I said. "I'm impressed." That earned me silence, which from Wolfe, as usual, meant agreement dressed in denial. I picked up the folded Gazette from his desk. The front page headline read, "Lawyer admits role in naval fraud. Wolfe's trap breaks ring." Below it was a smaller column quoting Kramer. "Credit to Nero Wolfe's analysis," it said. That was about as affectionate as Kramer got in print. "Well," I said, waving the paper, "the city loves us again. Give it 2 days and we'll be back to scandalous hermits." "2 days?" Wolfe murmured. "You're optimistic." I set the paper down and stretched. "You could at least look pleased. We solved the thing, cleared your friend's name, and kept the brownstone from becoming a morgue. Wolfe's gaze shifted to the safe across the room. Fritz brought the morning mail? Yeah, it's on your blotter. Bills, 2 advertisements, and this. I reached into my pocket and produced the envelope Danton's secretary had delivered before dawn. It was heavy enough to feel like conscience money. From Danton's solicitors, I said. The retainer, for services rendered or guilt assuaged. Wolfe didn't move. Deposit it in the safe. Without opening it? He nodded. Without. Mind if I ask why? Because it offends me, he said quietly. That caught me. Wolfe almost never used that word. Offends? Money, he said, is the language of transaction. This, he gestured toward the envelope, was not business. Then what was it? He looked past me toward the window where dawn had started to blush along the curtains. A duty to a friend, nothing more, nothing less. I didn't answer. Some moments didn't need narration. I stood, crossed to the safe, spun the dial and slid the envelope inside. The door clanked shut with a sound that felt final. When I turned back, Wolfe was watching me with that unreadable mix of pride and reproach. You disapprove, he said. I didn't say that. You thought it. Maybe, I said, but I'll keep it off the record. See that you do. Fritz returned just then as if the gods of timing were on payroll. Breakfast, sir? No, Wolfe said, not yet. Fritz hesitated. The eggs will cool. Let them. He left, shoulders sagging like a martyr of gastronomy. I took the empty chair opposite Wolfe's desk. The early light slid across the rug, picking out dust motes that had survived Fritz's eternal vigilance. For once, the office didn't smell of cigars or coffee, only the faint scent of orchid fertilizer drifting down from upstairs, where Theodore would already be fussing over the morning bloom. Wolfe finally reached for the beer, lifted it and took a long, deliberate sip. Then, setting it down, he spoke softly. Archie, do you know why I prefer beer to wine? Because beer forgives? He smiled faintly. Because it is honest. It declares its bitterness openly and cools the blood it warms. Wine flatters, deceives. Beer never lies. Not bad, I said. You should put that on a label. He ignored me again. Loyalty, he continued, is like beer. It should be served cold, without pretense or fever. Warm loyalty spoils. Then I'll keep mine on ice, I said. You already do, he said, almost gently. That was his version of affection. He wouldn't say thank you, but he'd remind me I existed, which from Wolfe was practically a medal. I leaned back, letting the chair creak. You think Renshaw would have liked how it ended? Wolfe's fingers tightened on the glass. I think he would have preferred to live. Failing that, he would be gratified to have his honour restored. He might even forgive you for calling him an idiot. He was an idiot, Wolfe said, but a loyal one. The clock on the wall ticked through a stretch of silence. Outside, traffic began to growl awake. A delivery truck backfired. Somewhere, a radio tried to start a song and failed. Wolfe drained the rest of his glass, the gesture deliberate, almost ceremonial. This concludes our association with the Navy, I trust. I wouldn't bet on it, I said. You're the only man in Manhattan who can solve a federal case without leaving his chair. That's bad news for your peace and good news for my overtime. He grunted. You are insufferable. That's what keeps you alive, I said. That got a twitch of the lips, which in Wolfian language meant amusement. He closed his eyes again, sinking deeper into the chair. The morning light had found his face now, softening the lines that usually looked carved by logic. For the first time in days, he seemed almost at rest. I went to the typewriter, rolled in a sheet, and started tapping out the closing memorandum, not because he'd asked for it, but because that's what I do when the room feels too full of ghosts. Case file, the Renshaw affair. Conclusion. 2 dead, 1 redeemed, 1 wiser. Assets recovered. Honour not payable in currency. I paused, looked up. You want me to include the cheque in the file index? No, Wolfe said without opening his eyes. It remains a private matter. Got it, I said, filed under sentiment. Pfui, he murmured. I grinned and went back to typing. The phone rang around 7. Kramer, naturally. His voice came through rough but steady. Tell Wolfe the DA's satisfied, Sloane singing like a nightingale with a gun to its head. Good work, I said. Kramer grunted. Don't butter me. And tell him he was right. I smiled. He'll frame that one. When I hung up, Wolfe hadn't moved. Kramer sends his regards, I said. I accept them with appropriate skepticism. Suit yourself, I said. For what it's worth, he didn't sound sore. He will, Wolfe said. He always does. It is his nature to resent efficiency. The clock struck 7:30. Fritz's patience expired with it. He reappeared, tray in hand. Breakfast, he said firmly. Wolfe sighed. Very well. Fritz placed the eggs, sausages, and toast like offerings to a weary god. Wolfe adjusted himself, picked up knife and fork, and, for the first time that morning, looked alive again. As for me, I poured a cup of coffee and sat back. The light was growing warmer now, burning the last grey from the room. Wolfe took a bite, chewed slowly, and said, You look contemplative. I'm thinking, I said, that friendship's like beer too, best served cold, but never flat. He glanced up at me, eyes faintly amused. You're improving, Archie. I try, I said, but I'll never match your head for it. He scowled, but the corners of his mouth betrayed him. Enough. Finish your coffee. We have orchids at 9. And that, as always, was the signal that the world was back in order. Murder solved, honour restored, breakfast served. The rest could wait. I looked once at the safe, at the envelope sleeping behind steel, and smiled. It wasn't money, not really. It was a quiet monument to a man Wolfe had called friend, and that made it worth more than any fee. Outside, the city finally caught fire with sunlight. Inside, Nero Wolfe reached for his beer. Fritz refilled the glass, and I made the last entry in the log. Case closed, justice served cold.